Hello there. While a Tory Prime Minister is in Egypt signing us into penury, the Labour opposition are busy working on how to control us. Now, if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe and then like and comment below. Now, it's been mentioned on this channel before that at some stage or other, the concept of introducing some sort of personal ID system in the UK to help us defeat the ills of crime and the scourge of the rubber boats will resurface. And right on cue, the left buttock of our parliament in the form of the Labour Party is proposing just that, while the right buttock of the same arrangement is over in Sharm el-Sheikh Down discussing how to impoverish us all, while our PM has already put the route to a central bank digital currency in place. Yes, the Shadow Immigration Minister Stephen Kinnock is advocating for an identity system to be forced on us that would be so helpful in reassuring the general public that they're being kept safe. And surprise, surprise, he's using the beach arrivals as the focal point. And he's making the usual soothing sounds about the limited amount of data that would be stored about you on such a system. And he's claiming that it would deter people from trying to enter the country illegally. Now, although not compulsory, the French can get themselves a national ID card, but everyone in France must be able to prove their ID when asked, or do so within 4 hours at a police station. But that hasn't stopped anyone getting into France, getting across the country and queuing up in Calais for days if not weeks, has it? Because the point is not that a system is in place, but who controls the system and who the system is used to monitor and control. And anyone turning up in the UK unannounced via the Border Force or RNLI would probably be given at least a temporary form of ID card as they landed here anyway. And any such system in the UK could be comfortably ignored by certain demographics, because the authorities would never demand ID from them for fear of the predictable backlash. Now, I predict that if Labour do end up in power and do pursue this idea, then they will be offering amnesty to all those who are here illegally if they come forward for an ID card. Because there is no way on earth that a future Labour government would ever deport anyone. And criminal gangs would soon be selling forged ID anyway. However, that would be the least of it. Given the Marxist underbelly of Labour, they would be much more interested in the control factor that an electronic ID system would deliver them. Like the social credit score concept, coupled with a central bank digital currency, meaning you would only be able to spend money when and on what they let you do, based on your carbon credits and on your social credit scores. Those believing that a digital ID system with the horsepower of modern and ever more powerful tech behind it won't be abused by those in authority should start worrying about being forced to carry such a thing. But the really big question for Labour is, will these new ID cards be compulsory to carry into a polling station to prove who you are to be able to vote? Labour don't like ID for voting, do they? So what's changed for them on the ID front then? And how will the homeless, for example, apply for one? And some might worry that such a chipped card might be tied in with their supposedly anonymous internet access. Anyway, it appears that the two parliamentary cheeks of the same apparatus are using a pincer action to work towards a new controlling order for us all. Now the world's elites are starting the process of forcing the Earth's plebs to dine on Frankenstein meats and milks made in chemical factories instead of eating natural foods, as well as grooming us to feast on ants and dung beetles. But when those same elites all turned up to COP27 via gas-guzzling jetliners to work out how to help the WEF to freeze and starve us all to death, they were living in opulence and dining on fine meats and fish, along with copious quantities of expensive cocktails. World leaders and delegates jetting into Egypt for the COP27 climate conference will be able to dine out on £90 mushroom sauce covered beef medallions and sip on fancy bottomless cocktails while facing calls to cut down on meat consumption to save the planet, reports the Mail. No corned beef sarnie and a mug of cha for that lot then. They really are rubbing our noses in their supremacy now, aren't they? So we now have a story about a dock getting gridlocked due to a lack of drivers and other staff, causing cars like BMWs and Teslas to pile up at sea and on land. Has Brexit struck again? Well, no, because this is happening in the German port of Bremerhaven. Yes, one of the largest vehicle hubs in the world is in gridlock, with the main cause being a lack of drivers to move the containers about. Now, the Ramoners always claim that there's a lack of workers in the UK because all the EU workers went back home. But if that's the case, why aren't they snapping up those jobs in Germany? I mean, we're always being told that's what the bloc is all about, aren't we? And now the UK is offshoring its fracking to the US. It's being reported that Rishi Sunak has struck a deal with Joe Biden to buy US natural gas. Although I do have the suspicion that this was started months ago, probably under Boris Johnson and helped along by Liz Truss. But it will be the slippery one that gets the credit when he claims that he has managed to fend off the threats of blackouts this coming winter. And that's straight out of the political playbook, as with the aforementioned ID cards. Make out there's an insurmountable problem today, and then tomorrow heroically present the people with the preferred solution you already had, and then make the plebs believe that particular solution is in their best interests. So anyway, we've decided that minor earth tremors should take place in another land, and that we should pay through the nose for our natural gas. Joe Biden will be so happy. And the worry we should have is what agreement has Sunak come to with Irish Joe behind closed doors. Now, it takes a lot of energy to compress natural gas into liquefied natural gas or LNG, then even more energy to transport the stuff over here in tankers, and then even more energy to regasify the LNG for use at this end. Why is that preferable to using our own? So it turns out that the planned bonfire of EU red tape might have to be slowed down or even shelved because another huge tranche of EU laws has been found. The idea of the bonfire of EU red tape is to trawl through any laws that were automatically transposed into UK law just before the legal severing of Brexit occurred and get rid of the ones we don't need by the end of next year, 2023. And 2,400 of those retained laws had been identified. But now another 1,400 have suddenly surfaced, making the job much more difficult, and I have to wonder how many more they're going to find. On top of that, there will have to be huge discussions with industry and various authorities to make sure that ditching those laws will have no impact. So there is talk of extending the deadline to 2026. But some say even that may not be possible. And all this got me thinking back to those heady pre-referendum days of the Brexit debate, where we were always informed by Remainers that EU law had little impact on us. And Nick Clegg told us during that famous head-to-head he had with Nigel Farage that only about 7% of our laws came from the EU. So if it's going to take so long to ditch this red tape, it sounds like it's far more far-reaching than a mere 7%. Now over to Richard, who's going to talk to us about the police. But before I do, I'll just ask, why is Gavin Williamson still in Sunak's cabinet?
Thank you, Jeff, and good evening. So, dear viewers, I think it's time we pause for a moment and ask ourselves some very serious questions regarding our police force. Firstly, let's take a look at the lack of police intervention with the Just Stop Oil, BLM and other woke liberal left-agendered protests. Why are all protests that have a liberal left-wing bearing not clamped down upon? In the middle of the pandemic, congregating en masse was banned by law. You couldn't even visit a dying loved one in hospital to prevent transmission of you-know-what. And we lived in a perpetually locked down society. Yet, BLM protests went ahead unchecked, with large congregations of people gathering in close proximity, at a time when we were apparently trying to prevent you-know-what from being transmitted. But for some reason, that was okay. And if at any time you or I were to have glued ourselves to the road in protest at the influx of criminal guests, or how a certain demographic in society treats our daughters, we would be arrested immediately and thrown in the neck. I don't think this is because our police themselves have become woke. No, I believe it is because they are policing in fear. Not with fear, but in fear. Yes, that's right. Our police are afraid to do a thing, just in case they are infringing upon somebody else's human rights, particularly if they are from one section of society with disproportionate amount of influence. In fact, the real culprit here is His Majesty's left-wing woke judiciary, who will throw the book at any protesters defending traditional values, whilst defending anyone who stands against said traditional values, thus tying the hands of our boys in blue. I know many of you believe we should defund the police, but I'm sorry, I totally disagree. What we need is for our police to return to their primary function of protecting us from true crimes, and not crimes redefined by millennial snowflakes. Bring back the Bobby who protects and serves his community, and is not the foot soldier of some overbearing state. All we need to do is bring every serving police officer into the station and make them swear a new oath of allegiance to protect the people above the dictates of the state, by applying common sense regardless of the law that the state decreed. And no, that isn't anarchy. What we have right now is anarchy. The only problem we now face is that in British society, right across the land, we have numerous independent communities, I say that very carefully, who do not follow some overarching communal belief held throughout the nation. They hold very different values. Yes, but anyway, we need our police to protect us from the state. Don't give up on them. Back over to you, Jeff.
Thank you, Richard. And finally, when subscribing, please don't forget to press that little bell and also select the all option, or you won't get any notifications when I publish a new video. And thank you all so much for taking the time to watch the show.